What is going on, Badger fans? Let's talk JMU. Let's talk Badger basketball. Let's talk a little football recruiting. We got that dude coming on the show today, and I'm really excited for it. On Wisconsin, and let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? It is March Madness Eve if you're a Badger fan, because we are playing tomorrow. I can't wait to watch that game against James Madison. Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. If you are the kind of driver that likes to push things just a little bit further, ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner, take the Nissan Rogue, Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada. Go find your next big adventure. Check them out today at nissanusa.com. And let's just jump into it again. When we get great guests on, man, we just try to jump right in, not waste any time. We got Nic Osen jumping on the show for the second time, Wisconsin Badgers beat reporter over at 247 Sports, and he does incredible work over there. I'm a member of the board. I can speak to it. I read everything he writes. So beyond humbled to have him back on the show, man. Nic, you are in Brooklyn. Like, what's the vibe out there with the team, with yourself? What's going on?
I really appreciate that welcome, my friend. You know, I really love being on this show. I'd be on it every week if you needed me. You know, the vibes are really good. This is my first time personally in Brooklyn. Of course, I've been to New York before, you know, NYC. I was actually, I guess, unfortunately, at the old Wisconsin-Florida game a few years back in the tournament. We won't think about that too much, but otherwise, honestly, vibes are really good. You know, I was able to fortunately welcome, you know, Greg Gard and the team. I was just able to see them at the hotel briefly Wednesday. Did a little interview, as I'm sure you saw on the site, and then obviously around the team at practice and things today. You know, I'll tell you this, because we always get in a little bit deeper throughout the show. For as confident as I think Wisconsin is, I put it on the board. James Madison and those players are speaking pretty confidently too. So I think we're in for a massive battle and a really good game Friday night, Ryan.
I can't wait for it. By the way, that timing to me, I know some people bemoan it a little bit, the late game. I love when the Badgers play the late game because then I can enjoy the rest of the games. Because if they lose early, like, I'm just done.
Yeah. I think not only, you know, that way, but kind of like the same thing for me. Of course, you know, I'll have a couple, probably 2 or 3 stories out early tomorrow, but then you get to the arena, maybe check out a couple of the other teams, get some dinner in me. And then when it's Wisconsin time, everybody, nearly the whole nation will be focused on that one, right? I know that, you know, it's on a good network, a great time slot, really, for a lot of people, maybe outside the East Coast. It will be a late game here, but I'm really looking forward to it. And I just feel like, especially since we last talked, because that was about a month ago, maybe a little bit more, but I feel like health wise, you know, mentally, everything with this Wisconsin men's basketball team, just in a much better spot right now. And it's why, frankly, whether I'm picking brackets for fun or, you know, doing kind of reporting and analysis, I've got some pretty solid expectations for Wisconsin in this tournament.
Well, I want to start there, actually, because I think one of the big key talking points, you mentioned it kind of there, was the health. Do you think they got a little healthier? Where do you think the health on this team really is? I talked to Patrick Herb about it. He said, I think he was a little sly, which I expected, right? I don't think Wahl or Blackwell looked 100% down the stretch. Where do you think we are right now health-wise?
Yeah, you know, I think that so Chucky, there was a bit of that scare, you know, when he didn't play. He wasn't officially ruled out, but when he didn't play one of the games up in Minneapolis, obviously he's great. He had 2 of his best ever college games, looked incredible. I'm definitely encouraged for John Blackwell. That I can tell you for certain. I can't tell you, you know, either way, like whether he is or isn't like 100% healthy. I can tell you there hasn't been a ton of talk about his health. Now, Tyler Wahl was asked about himself a little bit today, being earlier Thursday. And I think he's in a much better spot than he was over last weekend. I think we could all see he wasn't at 1,000%. It's really tough because the way he plays, he needs to cover a lot of ground, really on both ends of the floor, but specifically with his defensive versatility. So, you know, I think that was tough to see, especially because this is obviously his last go round with Wisconsin. But now I do think sincerely things have trended much better. He even said today, you know, us playing the late Friday night game has been a major plus for him. So I think that's really encouraging. The backcourt's in a good spot. Obviously, Kamari McGee's back. Somebody that I know we're both very high on, Steven Crowell's in a good spot. Like, the team, I think for the most part, is quite honestly about as healthy as you will see here in mid-March.
Yeah, that's a great point because it's really difficult to have all your – I mean, even if they're a little dinged up, and everybody's a little dinged up to some degree, I think, you have all the bullets in your gun right now in March.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of teams who can't say that. So I think that's pretty encouraging. Let's talk overall confidence level coming into this game. And then we're going to go kind of into keys to the game, players that we need to focus on, what you think of JMU. But just like, what's your confidence level going into this game? Because now you've had a week to kind of look at JMU, talk about JMU, see what they've done. How confident are you right now?
Yeah, so I think, matchup aside, right, because we'll get into the keys. I had told you, and I felt a little bit silly about a week or two later, but I had told you on this show that I thought this team could be an Elite Eight contender. And then they hit the tough stretch. And, like I said, I think very highly of the show. I was playing my spot back with you, and I was like, dang, that maybe didn't sound the best. And now I do feel validated because they just showed last weekend. That's not just a win or two. That is 3 wins in a row, 2 really, really good wins, one against somebody that I'm seeing 15 to 20% of the nation pick as the national champion. So they looked really good. I think that if they maybe would have just played 3 games total, they maybe have enough legs to beat Illinois last week. So basically, I say all that to say, unless we are just shocked by either kind of how Wisconsin game plan for this one, which I don't expect, or they just have one of those shooting slumps, I'm really confident, Ryan, about this Wisconsin team. I think that at first, when you saw that draw, I maybe didn't think Wisconsin would be favored by the 5 or 5.5, but I think they're getting some respect. I personally would have this line a little closer to 7, just because of the quality of opponents that Wisconsin has been able to perform against as of late. I think that James Madison is a good to really good team, but I even did an interview this week with one of their beat writers who went into great depths for our site, and he even said, a lot of their quality wins haven't necessarily been since November outside of App State within the conference, and James Madison didn't even win their conference outright. So frankly, I am really confident. I think that Coach Gard and the team are in a really good, loose, encouraging spot, and I think this is the time for them to put it all together and make a little bit noise like we've been used to for a lot of the 2000s.
Yeah, I'm actually right there with you, which is, it's scary to be too confident going into March and knowing that this team, sorry, I have a technical weirdness thing going on here. My light suddenly got brighter. But I'm pretty much there with you. Like, I'm not trying to, this is not meant as a dismissive thing with James Madison whatsoever. But when you really look at their schedule, that one Michigan State win, and I mentioned this on a previous show, Michigan State shot 1 of 20 from 3.
Yeah.
And I went back and I have this thing called Synergy where I can look at every play. But you look at every shot Michigan State took, a lot of them were just wide open shots. And that's really the win that a lot of people hang their hat on with James Madison, which was a close win at the beginning of the year against the Michigan State team that shot 5% from 3.
Yeah.
They went on the road
Great point.
Right in Breslin. So you give them credit, but like, you're going to beat just about anybody if they shoot 5%.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Wisconsin handled Michigan State twice. I just feel like there's a strength of schedule, iron sharpens iron. And I don't think James Madison has been tested in the way Wisconsin's been tested. And it makes me feel pretty confident going into this one.
Yeah, that is one of my biggest kind of reasons for confidence. I don't think, as a reporter, fan, whatever it may be, you don't want to get ahead of yourself, right? Because we just saw earlier today, Kentucky lost to Oakland. So like, anybody, and that's basically an NBA team for Kentucky in terms of talent. So anybody can lose to anybody, but Wisconsin's not overlooking JMU. I'm just very confident. I give a lot of respect to Coach Byington and the Dukes over there. They've had a heck of a year, but I just feel like Wisconsin is actually even better than their record is right now. I think they've shown when they are fully healthy, when guys are locked in and shooting at a decent rate, what they can do. So while I think that JMU is a really good regular season team and very well put together, I think that Wisconsin has the potential to get to the second weekend, and obviously this would be a great start in doing that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on it, and I actually agree with you on the line. I was talking to somebody else, my buddy, and I said, I think the Badgers are going to win, and I think it's going to be by like 6 to 10. I really do, and that's reflective of the confidence I have right now. Now, listen, anybody can lose to anybody. You mentioned it. Kentucky just lost to a 14 seed.
Yeah.
A lot of 12 seeds can beat 5 seeds. Like, if tomorrow comes and JMU wins, I don't think anybody's going to be shocked, but I will say this, I would be surprised.
Yeah. Yep. I wouldn't be shocked. I would be surprised, though, if Wisconsin plays their game, if you know what I mean. Like they stick to their style, which is something I got to speak with Coach Gard about a couple times this week. If Wisconsin just plays how they have been recently, they're not elite defensively, but they've shown that in stretches they can really lock you down and care, to that level that we've been used to with the Wisconsin programs. Plus, you play around AJ Storr offensively. You play through the post, which you're going to hear me say more of in kind of some of the keys here for victory. I just feel like when this Wisconsin team steps on the court right now, they don't fear anybody. I don't think they ever did all season, if that makes sense. But I personally, being, 10 feet from the action and seeing these players and the coaching staff and speaking with them after the Purdue game, I think that was a massive, massive victory. And I think it did some things for them, not only basketball wise and their record, but confidence wise too. I mean, you're playing against, I would put other players above him, but in terms of awards, the best player in the country, a top 10 to 15 coach. And like, did Wisconsin win easily? Absolutely not. But I think for good stretches, they were the better team and were very deserving of that victory.
Yeah, I agree with that. It was a really gritty and deserved win. It didn't feel flukish at the end.
Mm-mm.
And you fluke your way into some wins over the course of a 30-ish game season. That wasn't flukish. They won with
No.
people fouled out. And they shot 21% from three. Purdue outshot them from the 3-point line.
Yeah.
Like, that was an earned win, man. All right, we're going to come back. We're going to take a quick break for our friends of the show. Come back. What scares Nick about this game? We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show. New friends of the show over at Manscaped. Listen, when I moved into my house, I've been here for a while, I had this big field area and I had to go clear it out. And I grabbed a machete, true story, and I was hacking it away. And it's just so much work. And I was getting cut up by the thorns. And it was a disaster. With Manscaped, you can just clean out that underbrush and you don't got to worry about it. No disaster, no nicks, no cuts. With our new lawnmower 5.0, this bad boy will cut through all that for your little bit of spring cleaning you need for your lady. That's what Manscaped is here for. Plus, this bad boy is waterproof wherever you want to do it, like in a river, in a lake, in the shower, whatever it is. Manscaped is here for all of your needs, all your personal hygiene needs. And now you get 20% off and free shipping with the code LOCKEDON over at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code LOCKEDON over at manscaped.com. Nothing like a little bit of spring cleaning down there for the underbrush. Manscaped.com, 20% off and free shipping. Today's episode is also brought to you by our great friends over at Gametime. If you've ever been stressed trying to find tickets, I have. Like, I remember I was finding tickets to a Suns Knicks game. And I thought I got good tickets. Turns out I was sitting literally right behind a beam. I couldn't see Devin Booker in all of his glory. Wasted money, wasted time. It was a disaster. And the Celtics won, so whatever. Maybe it turned out for the best. But Gametime is here to get all your ticket prices, logistics taken care of. You can buy last-minute flash deals, get tickets to sports, concerts, theater, whatever you want. Gametime has the largest inventory tickets at the best prices, and you can buy tickets at the last minute with flash deals to save on logistics. Download the Gametime app today. Use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. That's download the app, code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON college for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's get Nick back on the show, man. Let's keep chopping this game up. Nick, I want to start here, man. So you and I are both confident. What scares you about this game?
Yeah, I think two things, Ryan, would really scare me. Now, James Madison is this interesting blend of, they can play with speed. They like to shoot threes, kind of like in Nebraska, but they're also an older team. They're experienced. They don't turn the ball over a lot. So one thing would be if they can speed up Wisconsin, and then Wisconsin turns the ball over a lot. Wisconsin's actually been pretty good, even during some of the losing streak with turnovers. They've gotten much better kind of throughout the course of the year. For the most part, it's been a little bit more like what we are used to. But at times, I think of a few plays last week in a fast break or transition when they try to do a little bit too much and can kind of get an easy turnover. That would scare me because James Madison plays very good basketball. And then because James Madison shoots a lot of threes, if Wisconsin gets out of their play style a little bit, becomes too reliant on the three-point shot from long range, and let's say they hit a cold spell, like a 1 of 9 type stretch that we have seen it multiple times, even in some wins. Like you mentioned in the Purdue game, at times it was really tough to watch. Those are the two biggest things that if that happens to the Badgers, I've got a hard time seeing them win because James Madison is not elite defensively, but kind of like I said about Wisconsin, they can defend and they can score that rock. I know that as we've talked both on and off the show, we've seen that in these Dukes. Byington has a really interesting offense. As I get into kind of some of the key players, it's really run around guard/wing Terrence Edwards Jr. And I think if those things aren't kind of played, let's say to Wisconsin's advantage, it could be a long, late night out east. I don't think that's going to happen. I saw a team on a mission in Minneapolis. So I don't have those doubts, but those are the areas that I think would scare me.
Yeah, I want to talk about Edwards for a second. And for those who haven't watched him, when I saw this matchup, listen, it's not like I watched any James Madison this year. I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke. But when I saw the matchup and I look at the box score, I'm like, all right, I got to check out a couple of these players. I went and looked at Edwards, watched several games of his. The problem with Edwards for me is I don't think we have a good matchup for him. He's a 6'6", kind of slithery. I mispronounced that word, but he's really good at changing pace. He's good at getting in the paint. He'll pull up from three. He's got good size. He's pretty quick. Ideally, you have a 6'5", 6'6" wing you can put on him, but we really don't because Storr hasn't been able to be that guy defensively. I think Klesman's going to guard him, but Klesman's going to give up 3 inches in that matchup. He's a tough matchup. Like he's a guy who I think can give the Badgers problems here. Let me know who you think. I think it's going to be Klesman on him, but that's a tough matchup for Klesman just with the size difference.
Yeah, tough matchup for just about anybody in the country, quite honestly. I think it'll come down to Klesman or Hepburn. Hepburn, obviously a lot smaller, but we saw he had some possessions against Terrence Shannon Jr. early just because he's got that, kind of that toughness to him. Obviously the great fundamentals defensively. He's got strength. He can get into the other guy's head. I wouldn't be shocked at all if we see multiple different looks, kind of like we saw against Boo Buie and Northwestern. If we see 2, maybe 3 of those guys, I'm sure John Blackwell will get his opportunities. But you're right. He's kind of that impressive blend, like can shoot a little bit, obviously can pass the ball. He's got great strength, pretty good speed, and just so much of the offense kind of runs through him in Terrence Edwards Jr. So I would choose probably between, somebody in the backcourt. They'd be giving up size, but maybe still kind of hold some of that strength to them and just the defensive fundamentals that maybe you don't always see from some of the wings at Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think it's a good call on Hepburn, though, because Hepburn's a guy who can hound them a little bit and maybe force turnovers. That's a pretty good call, actually. Let's talk about flip it around. So some of the things that scare us with this matchup, I think we're probably both going to start in the same spot when we start to talk about some of the things that we like about this matchup. I had the Sun Belt guy on, and he was super confident, which I totally respect. But he seemed to think like a guy like Bickerstaff, they're 6'9", kind of 220. He seemed to think we have size. And I was like, there's size, but then there's 7 foot 250. I think Wisconsin's going to be able to really, and not just with Crowl. I think with Crowl and Wahl is really going to be able to attack them in the post. And it's not a super deep team for JMU. So I think that's the obvious matchup for Wisconsin to start with.
Yeah, yep. That was exactly where my mind went when I even saw this matchup Sunday. I knew enough about James Madison to at least know kind of how they play, what they like to do, kind of some of their strengths. And Steven Crowl has looked for probably, what would you say, 4 out of the last 5 games, just phenomenal. I mean, he showed me a lot kind of with his toughness, skill set, scoring, just being physical against a guy like Zach Edey. He fouled out, but he showed me that toughness. Now, obviously, Bickerstaff isn't Edey, but I do think Bickerstaff's a good player. I love what you said about Wahl. If he's even 85, 90%, like he should be able to make some things happen. And another thing I like is, we mentioned, all right, we'll see who Wisconsin puts on Terrence Edwards Jr. Who does JMU use to defend AJ Storr?
It's a great
because
question.
He is faster, stronger, and just athletically much more defined than a lot of what JMU can offer. I honestly, this is a guy I feel like, I'll go back to the Michigan State game at Breslin or late against Minnesota on the road or kind of the beautiful, like incredible Michigan State performance at home. And then, some of these games in Minneapolis, like I think Storr is that guy that lives up to the moment. He wants the ball. He wants those moments. He has not been shy about saying that. But for what would you say, 85, 90% of those times, he's really come through for this Wisconsin team. Do I want him necessarily having to shoot 20, 25 times? No. You want Hepburn and Crowl certainly involved. And I don't think we're talking enough about Klesman either offensively, but just in terms of what I like, I think Crowl and Storr hold major advantages for Wisconsin Friday.
Yeah, here's the other one, and I've talked about this a little bit. This is going to be one of the smallest front courts for a guy like AJ Storr to finish against at the rim.
Nice.
Right. We talk a lot about when you see the size disparity, it's a lot about the post players. AJ Storr's been finishing against Big Ten front courts, against Zach Ease, against Illinois is a big physical front court with big physical wings, right? Against Michigan State, like against Rutgers, right? Like you've seen their front court. I have a feeling like the guy who might benefit the most from this is AJ Storr has been getting into the paint at will, who gets to the free throw line a ton. I just think it's a great matchup for him. And I'm glad you brought him up because I don't know how they're going to guard him. And frankly, I think he's starting to put up kind of NBA type film. Like I think that train is starting to pick up some acceleration here with how he played in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah. There's no question that, I've seen a little bit more kind of outward buzz from media about kind of things like that and some of these great performances. I think that obviously March Madness is often the time where you see guys like maybe rise or fall, in the other direction for some players. But Ryan, that's my favorite point you have made, so far. I love that idea of kind of finishing at the rim, being able to help Storr. In addition, they don't have a ton of size. So if he's able to draw even 2 fouls from a guy like Bickerstaff, kind of working his minutes down and getting him closer to fouling out, I think that's really smart. I think that he's still got, some room to grow in terms of finishing, but just the way he gets there so easily. Like at times it's literally just like without any extra effort. It's just so seamless for him to get there. That's something, Coach Gard and the staff will tell you, like that's something you can't really teach. It's a really impressive ability. And I'm going to add that. I might make that 1A now because I think that's a really smart point for what could lend Wisconsin to a victory tomorrow night offensively. I think that's really smart. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if they kind of get rolling with that early, working inside and out and letting Storr attack like that as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to cause a cascading problem for JMU. And I think your point of getting in foul trouble, Storr's excellent at that. Him and Blackwell, the best of the team in getting people into foul trouble, getting into the paint, getting into contact. So we're going to take a quick break, come back. I want to ping Nic a little bit on football recruiting. Specifically, has the staff fallen off a little bit from last year's pace? I'm going to get his take on that coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at Nissan Motors. And every week at Nissan, every week when we do this, we pick one team and talk a little bit about that team and what they've done with March Madness going on. This week's team, I'm going to take a little bit of a break from the teams that I normally talk about because I'm going to talk about Wisconsin. Wisconsin can only be described as the Nissan Pathfinder because they kind of forged their own path this entire year, right? Started off really hot, got lost in the wilderness for a little bit, and then like a Nissan Pathfinder, they came banging out of that forest on fire, bringing the family, the adventure, and the excitement with it. They are the Nissan Pathfinder for this week's journey. Right now, take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure over at shop now at nissanusa.com. The entire 2024 lineup of Nissan SUVs are big, powerful, including the gigantic Armada, can take the entire fam. 4x4. It's an incredible vehicle. Shop now at nissanusa.com. Go find your next big adventure. Let's get Mr. Osen back on. Nic, definitely want to give you an opportunity, as always, to I talked a little bit about the great work that you do, but tell us a little bit more how people can find you, connect with you.
Ryan, that really means a lot to me. I put a lot of pride into my work, and it's been incredible, quite honestly, to be able to cover my university in the University of Wisconsin. So, at the real Nic Osen on Twitter, on X, that is where I'll send just about all of my stories. And then we're over at Badger 247, fresh content every single day of the year, every holiday, whatever that looks like. So I really appreciate it. And, even though we're talking a lot of hoops, I've still got a couple football recruiting updates coming up this weekend and the basketball recruiting update or two as well.
I love it, man. And again, having been a member, and this is just, I can personally say this, 247 for a long time. And I'm also like, I'm on a lot of sites, but what Nic has done, come over 247 and just augment the great work that Evan Flood does. I highly, highly recommend people, if you're a Badger fan, go check it out. You're going to get smarter, get more insight. It's a good board. So I'm not just saying it because he's here. I'm a member of that site. And Nick, I was looking at I had an interesting thought the other day. I was just trying to kind of parse it, and I really just want your perspective on it. So last year,
Mhm.
the Badgers finished with, I think we talked about it before the show, but 247 4-stars, right? Essentially in that recruiting class. The Badgers have 9 commits so far in the 2025 cycle, no 4-stars. Does it, and I agree, obviously bumps can still happen. The story's not fully written on any of these players, but just looking at the rankings, does it feel like the staff has not kept up with that pace from last year?
So I totally get, why you would ask that, Ryan, and why fans like it. I mean, obviously, a big part of what we do at 247 is ratings. So I want people to, kind of appreciate ratings and things like that. I don't think there, is any like falling off pace or a reason to worry or anything like that right now. And I want to explain a couple reasons why. One, it is very, very early. We're not even through spring visits. Like, people are setting up official visits. And I can tell you confidently, and you see it on the board all the time, Wisconsin is very, very much in on a lot of 4-star guys, top 100, 150 type talents. Whether all of them come to Madison or not, they're of course more than likely to get a couple of those guys. And number two, this is with respect to, the players rated so far, as well as kind of my colleagues. Like, maybe not every player that's gotten kind of ratings has had as many live evals as some of the other 4-stars. I mean, I can tell you, off the top of my head, I think a guy like Brendan Ains, who I believe was actually recently on your show, he's due for a ratings bump. Who else? I think the healthy Michael Roski this fall could be up to a 4-star. I really couldn't think any highly of Torin Petaway's potential, a guy that is just getting into football. And I know that some of our local ratings guys in that area love his ability. Sam Leteju. So am I telling you that every single one of those guys is going to end up 4-stars? No, I don't think that's fair. But even if, 247 maybe doesn't have them as a 4, there are still the composite ratings. And, I think that there's a chance, I'm sure we'll be doing some of these around official visit season. So I think that that'll be another time to really kind of dive in. I think it's totally fair. And again, it's awesome to look into kind of those ratings. But right now, I named about half the class, and I sincerely think, guys like that could be bumping up. I don't know if he'll get quite to 4-star status, but I love Remington Moss and what he can do. Just the versatility, the length he has, I mean, a lot of people, including yourself, are kind of smiling at that. So I would say there's a ton of time, and I'm pretty confident that Wisconsin and this staff will land some more of these guys. I mean, there are players that I don't even think the most diehard of fans are consistently thinking about, just because the Badgers are doing so well with kind of players all over the country. But several of these guys that are locking in OBs, 4-star guys, top 150 guys, and there's time. I really, wouldn't make it up. I mean, maybe they don't end up at 9, 247 4-stars. Maybe it's like 7 or 8 this year. But overall, I really do love this class. And what I love about it, outside of just football, is the way they've bonded together in terms of helping to recruit other players. And just within the class, the versatility that so many of these guys show. I think of Petaway. I think of Ains. I think of Jameer Scott. Like, there's a lot of guys that can be successful at multiple positions within Mike Tressler's defense. And I really think that it's going to end up being another really impressive class of Madison.
I think that's a great point, man. The defensive versatility of these players. Remington Moss, you threw out there. That guy can play jumbo corner, safety. He could even get a little bigger and even maybe be a weird kind of linebacker type dollar player. I love his film. I think he is so good. There's a lot of pieces that could be very versatile, and that goes back to last year's class with the Raphael Dunn guys. So I agree with you there. And star rankings are always an interesting thing, right? Because the Badgers have obviously shown you can do a lot more with 3-star kids. But if we're being honest, the teams that win the championships also have mostly 4- and 5-star kids. The truth is they matter, but they're not the be-all, end-all. Where that line falls is kind of interesting to me. Talk to me really quick. I kind of want to wrap up here because I feel like this is a guy who's usually the centerpiece of a class, but in this class and with the Badgers, he almost never gets talked about. Let's talk about Locke for 1 second. Just any thoughts you have on the younger Braden, or the Landon Locke, the younger brother of Braden Locke, coming from a big time part of Texas. I talked to their head coach, and from what he said, he's like his brother, but bigger and stronger. But he doesn't seem to have a ton of buzz. I'm just curious what your perspective on Locke is.
Yeah, I think a reason for that is just because it was so early that he did commit. I think that, fans, they don't forget about him by any means, but they're always kind of looking to see who could be next. And, that's a part of recruiting. It's a fun aspect, but I love his size. I love his grasp of the game. I really like his leadership. And honestly, Ryan, I think he's due for a pretty big senior year from what I've seen, in my own eyes in some of the film and just kind of some of the buzz I've heard about his respective program. I feel like, once we get through OVs, you add some more commitments there, and then you're getting toward, okay, it's senior eval time. Let's get excited to watch these seniors that are already in the class. I see some more buzz being there. I think that he maybe won't have as much buzz as like Mabry did in the last class. And I think everybody seemed to have more buzz last year just because it was this staff's first full class, just in terms of respect with that. But overall, I think he's also doing a really nice job connecting with other recruits. From what I've heard, Locke is doing a great job there. That's something you love to see from a quarterback commit. I can tell you, in covering recruiting now for 3 or 4 years, that's a great thing. And I think we're going to be seeing some nice highlight packages as we get into August and late September.
Let me ask you about a theory, and I'll wrap up here. I've already kept you for a minute longer than I meant to. I have a theory in my head, though. If you get the older brother and the coaching staff immediately goes after the younger brother, it means they like the character. They believe in the culture, that family.
Without a doubt. I'm shaking my head just in terms of absolute agreement. That is an awesome point. Truly, Ryan, I mean, that's something great, to think about. And you're exactly right. Like, by the time they really got in on Landon, there was still limited film out there. But the fact that he has D1 potential, again, you're really impressed by how his brother already in Madison handles things. And I could certainly tell you that from being around the program for a year. He's just, get in, one of the first people in, certainly the last one out in terms of film studies, communicating with his teammates, looking out for people. And obviously, he throws a pretty dang good football too. So I think it's a, really good point. I think that things are going to be interesting when we head into 2025 for that QB situation. So I totally agree. And overall, I'm pretty confident that this 2025 class is going to end up in a really, really good spot, because I can tell you, I'm not going to say I know more than all of our ratings guys, nothing like that, but several of these players are due for bumps. And I think people are going to be very excited once we get to the fall again.
I love it, man. Nic Osen, 247 beat reporter, as always, bringing insight. We get smarter because you're here, man, and I really appreciate it. Go enjoy the rest of the night in Brooklyn. Have fun, not too much fun, and then tomorrow, let's beat JMU.
Hey, my fun will be writing a couple more stories for you guys, man. I truly love this show, Ryan. It's one of my favorite I've ever been on, and enjoy the game, my friend.
I love it, Nick. Thank you so much. Badger fans, tomorrow we will talk a little football, but obviously we'll go live after the game. So tune in to Locked On Badgers. As always, we got you covered here on Wisconsin, and we'll talk later.